Imagine a world where speed isn't just about numbers on a dial, but about proving that passion and ingenuity can outshine reputation. Picture a tiny team stepping into a roaring arena dominated by giants, armed with nothing more than sheer determination and a willingness to gamble it all. Every curve of the track, every shriek of the engine, every flicker of doubt in the crowd's eyes becomes a test of endurance, of belief, of whether the impossible can be dragged into reality. This isn't a tale of comfort or predictability. It's about risk, the kind that can make or break legacies, the kind that dares to challenge centuries of confidence with raw grit. Think of a duel where the stakes are measured not only in victories but in identity, pride, and the chance to shake an entire culture awake. When the underdog dares to stand tall, the entire sport takes notice. What unfolds is more than just competition. It's theater, drama, and the enduring question of what it takes to matter. Stick with us, hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment on what story you want us to uncover next. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 arrived at a time when the American car market was shifting from family sedans toward a hunger for performance and identity. And its story begins in an era where manufacturers realized that racing success could translate directly to showroom sales. This car wasn't just another muscle machine. It was a statement that even the smallest player could challenge the giants on their own turf. What set it apart wasn't just raw horsepower, but the daring decision to pit it against rivals with far greater budgets and pedigrees. By stepping into this high-stakes arena, the Javelin became a lightning rod for debate, both inside the company and among enthusiasts, about whether such a gamble could ever pay off. This is where we start to peel back the layers of how a modest automaker tried to punch above its weight, a move that set the stage for one of the most unlikely showdowns in American motorsport. Micro story, the birth of a challenger. The AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, was conceived in the crucible of late 1960s ambition. When the muscle car boom had made performance the ultimate badge of pride, while other manufacturers leaned on vast resources and long racing traditions, AMC crafted a sleek, aggressive coupe designed to capture both the eye and the imagination. Its designers weren't just sketching lines, they were sketching a future where AMC wouldn't always be a footnote. The Javelin represented an invitation for drivers to believe that speed and style could come from unexpected places. Its launch marked the start of an uphill battle that was as cultural as it was mechanical. Micro story. Betting on Trans Am glory, with the AMC Javelin 1968-1974, leadership made a decision that would define its legacy. They entered the Trans Am Racing Series, an arena where automotive giants went to prove themselves. The logic was simple. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. If the Javelin could make a name for itself against the titans of the track, customers would see it as more than a quirky outsider. This wasn't just about marketing. It was about staking the company's identity on asphalt and steel. The pressure was immense, the odds stacked high, but the potential rewards made the gamble irresistible. Context digest. Market shifts. By the late 1960s, performance cars had become cultural icons, and manufacturers recognized that younger buyers wanted more than basic transport. They wanted cars that reflected their personality. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 emerged directly from this demand. AMC couldn't compete on scale, but they could offer something with attitude. A car that dared to be as bold as the others without following the same formula. This made the Javelin both a risk and a revelation. Micro story. The design philosophy. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 wasn't shaped in a vacuum. It was carefully sculpted to balance aesthetics with function. Its long hood, short deck proportions, and muscular stance tapped into the visual language of performance, while subtle details gave it an identity distinct from its peers. This design wasn't just about looking fast. It was about symbolizing ambition, a visual declaration that AMC had entered a new conversation. Every curve spoke of intent, every crease of confidence, even if the company behind it was still the underdog. Context. Digest. Corporate realities. While rivals had sprawling factories and deeper pockets, AMC operated on tighter margins, committing the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 to racing wasn't merely an engineering decision, it was a survival strategy. Victories, even small ones, could transform the company's reputation, but the downside was equally steep. Because failure on the track could reinforce doubts about AMC's credibility, the stakes were existential, making every decision carry disproportionate weight. Reflection bridge. To understand why the Javelin mattered, you have to appreciate how fragile AMC's position was, and how daring it was to place such faith in a single car. Microstory. Racing as identity. Once the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 began competing, it carried far more than a driver's hopes. It carried the pride of a company struggling to carve out recognition. Each lap wasn't just a contest of speed, it was a battle for legitimacy. Fans began to notice the scrappy contender that refused to be intimidated. And that narrative alone began to shift perceptions. The Javelin was no longer just a product, it was a symbol of persistence. Context Digest, cultural symbol, the AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, quickly became associated with rebellion against convention. Its very existence challenged the assumption that only the largest players could dominate performance markets for young buyers. It represented a way to stand apart, to choose something different, and that outsider appeal gave it cultural value that extended beyond raw numbers. This underdog identity became its greatest strength. Reflection bridge. What began as a gamble was slowly transforming into an ethos, one that would reshape how the Javelin was perceived both on the street and in competition. Microstory. The turning point races. As the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 started to notch competitive finishes, it silenced critics who claimed it didn't belong. The car wasn't just showing up. It was performing at a level that forced rivals to take notice. Each success created ripples in the press and in the marketplace, validating AMC's risky bet. These moments weren't just wins on a track, they were victories in narrative, giving AMC a new kind of credibility that could never have been purchased with advertising alone. The foundation had been laid. The Javelin had proven itself worthy of attention, but the true test would come in how far it could push that momentum, leading us into the deeper battles of its racing era. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 entered its second phase defined not by introduction, but by escalation, having proven it could stand on the same grid as more established names. The question became whether it could sustain that momentum. Racing was no longer about proving it belonged, but about proving it could win. The stakes shifted from survival to ambition, and every development in engineering, sponsorship, and driver lineup pushed the story forward. The Javelin's tale in this period is one of sharpening its edge while carrying the burden of higher expectations, and that pressure would either forge it into a true contender or crush it under the weight of its own aspirations. Microstory. Engineering under pressure. To keep the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 competitive, its engineers had to refine performance relentlessly, every ounce shaved from weight, every tweak to aerodynamics. Every fine-tuned gear ratio mattered. While rivals had resources to experiment broadly, AMC had to be precise, making fewer but more strategic changes. The car became a rolling laboratory, proof that necessity breeds ingenuity, and each mechanical improvement was both a technical upgrade and a lifeline. Context Digest. The racing climate. During this period, the racing world was intensifying. With fans demanding more drama and teams pushing limits harder, the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 wasn't operating in a vacuum. It was entering an increasingly professionalized environment where winning required perfection. The underdog narrative bought goodwill, but results mattered more. Audiences respected effort, but sponsors demanded victories. And that tension dictated every move AMC made. Microstory, drivers, and destiny. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 wasn't just a machine. It was an extension of the drivers who pushed it to its limits. Those behind the wheel became part of the legend, amplifying its story with daring overtakes and stubborn resilience. Every race weekend turned into theater, where the car and driver combination either electrified the crowd or endured the sting of near misses. The bond between human and machine became inseparable from the narrative. reminding fans that the Javelin's fight wasn't just mechanical, but deeply human. Context digest. Sponsorship stakes. Racing. The AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, also meant navigating financial realities. Securing backing was essential, and sponsors needed to see returns. This pressure created a balancing act, where engineers and marketers had to collaborate, ensuring the car wasn't only fast but also carried the right image. Without that dual success, the campaign could falter. This intertwining of economics and engineering illustrated how the Javelin was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Reflection bridge. It wasn't enough to be fast. The Javelin had to be iconic, visible, and undeniably competitive, or the dream could unravel. Micro-story, the breakthrough wins. When the AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, finally scored significant victories, the impact was seismic. Fans who once dismissed it as a novelty began to see it as a legitimate rival. These triumphs validated the sacrifices. From boardroom decisions to sleepless nights in the garage, each checkered flag didn't just add to a tally. It shifted perception, proving that the smallest company in the fight could still reshape the outcome. The wins were as much about morale as about silverware. Context digest, media and myth-making. Coverage of the AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, turned its narrative into legend. Magazines, commentators, and fans latched onto the story of the scrappy contender. Its image as a cultural disruptor was amplified, giving it a mythology larger than its market share. The attention wasn't always flattering, but it was invaluable, ensuring that the Javelin was never ignored. Reflection bridge. What had begun as a daring gamble was now a saga of legitimacy, with every race writing another chapter in a story few had predicted. Micro-story, cultural ripple effects. The AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, became more than a car. It was a banner for those who believed in challenging authority. Drivers, fans, and even casual observers saw in it a metaphor for persistence against impossible odds. It resonated with a generation hungry for authenticity, and that connection elevated the Javelin beyond a simple machine. Its presence on the track fueled pride among supporters who saw themselves mirrored in its struggle. As the story of the Javelin built momentum, it became clear that its legacy wouldn't rest solely on race results, but on what those results meant, leading us into how this bold gamble ultimately shaped its impact and long-term legacy. The AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, reached its defining stage when its earlier battles crystallized into legacy. The question was no longer whether it belonged or whether it could win, but what those wins and struggles would ultimately mean for the company, for fans, and for the broader culture of American performance cars. The car's journey had evolved from underdog experiment into a lasting symbol, one that carried weight far beyond its production numbers. This was the phase where reputation was solidified, and where every memory of its thunder on the track transformed into a lasting imprint on history. Micro-story, the season of validation. The AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, enjoyed competitive seasons that finally answered its critics. When it stood atop podiums, it validated years of effort and risk. The victories weren't simply about beating opponents. They were about proving that innovation and persistence could triumph even in the harshest environments. These successes rippled back into showrooms, sparking renewed attention from buyers who now saw the Javelin as more than a curiosity. It had become a legitimate option, backed by the aura of proven performance. Context digest, ownership on the street. For everyday drivers, the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 offered the thrill of racing heritage in a package that was attainable. Owners weren't just buying a car, they were buying a piece of the underdog story. Its styling, tied to its on-track persona, made it stand out in neighborhoods dominated by more common choices. Living with a Javelin meant aligning with a spirit of rebellion, choosing identity over conformity, and that connection between racing and daily life gave the car lasting resonance. Micro-story, the weight of legacy. As the AMC Javelin, 1968-1974, moved closer to the end of its production run, the question shifted toward what it would leave behind. It wasn't destined to dominate the market forever, but it had already done something arguably more valuable. It had proven that a company with fewer resources could still produce a car that altered the competitive landscape. Its influence extended to design trends, marketing strategies, and the way smaller players approached performance aspirations. Context digest, cultural memory. Long after the last AMC Javelin 1968-1974 rolled off the line, its story continued to echo. Collectors, enthusiasts, and motorsport historians remembered it not just for its specifications, but for the audacity of its challenge. It was invoked whenever discussions of underdogs arose, a reminder that impact isn't always measured in dominance, but in courage. The Javelin's image became shorthand for a certain spirit of American grit. Reflection bridge. Its legacy wasn't about overwhelming success, but about the power of daring to try and daring to matter. Microstory, the enthusiast afterlife. Today, the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 survives in the hands of enthusiasts who treasure its rarity and story. At shows, races, and gatherings, the Javelin draws a particular kind of admiration. People don't just see a car. They see the embodiment of a challenge thrown at the establishment. This living legacy ensures that the Javelin's name continues to carry weight, even decades removed from its heyday. Its survival in enthusiast circles keeps the fire of its narrative burning bright. By the end of its journey, the Javelin had written a story far larger than anyone predicted. It wasn't just another competitor. It was a reminder that ambition can elevate the smallest contender into a timeless symbol. This sets the stage for understanding its true place in the broader sweep of automotive history. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 left behind a legacy that was bigger than sales charts or production totals. It stood as proof that a smaller automaker could reshape conversations about performance, culture, and courage. Its presence on the track and in the streets carved a unique space in American automotive history, one that continues to spark admiration among enthusiasts and curiosity among newcomers. From the moment it debuted, the Javelin demanded attention. Its aggressive design and racing ambitions positioned it as more than just another muscle car. It was a declaration that style and speed didn't have to come from the industry's largest players. Over time, this identity became inseparable from its essence, making ownership as much about belonging to a bold story as about driving the car itself. For those who lived with the AMC Javelin 1968-1974, ownership was a blend of pride and practicality. While it might not have carried the polish of its larger market rivals, it offered character in spades. Maintenance required dedication, but that dedication created strong bonds between car and driver. On the road, the Javelin projected individuality. At gatherings, it drew respect precisely because it was different. Choosing a Javelin wasn't about chasing the obvious option. It was about aligning with an underdog spirit that resonated with people who valued grit over glamour. On the racing side, the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 delivered results that continue to matter. Today, its victories proved that smart engineering and determined execution could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Those wins are remembered not as statistical footnotes, but as cultural milestones. Their ripple effect extended into how smaller companies viewed motorsport, showing that it could be a pathway to legitimacy and influence rather than just an expensive gamble. In that sense, the Javelin became a blueprint for how underdogs could play the game differently and still leave a lasting mark. The Javelin's story also offers a mirror for broader American culture during its era. It reflected a time when questioning norms and resisting conformity were gaining traction, and when choosing something unconventional was a way of making a statement. The AMC Javelin 1968-1974 tapped directly into that cultural current, embodying the idea that courage mattered as much as resources. Today, that resonance explains why collectors still seek them out and why enthusiasts still speak of them with reverence. Looking back, the AMC Javelin 1968-1974 is more than just another chapter in muscle car history. It's a reminder that ambition and heart can punch far above their weight, that legacies aren't always defined by dominance, but sometimes by the refusal to be ignored. The Javelin continues to inspire because it dares us to imagine what happens when the smallest contender decides to stand tall against the mightiest, the final takeaway is simple. The Javelin wasn't just a car. It was a declaration that even the least expected challenger can change the game forever.